started here this morning. Before we jump into our material for the morning, just a reminder, our caroling event is this afternoon. At this point, what we're determining is the plan is to meet at this place, First Spring Garden Senior Assisted Living Center first at 2:30. Not meet here, meet there. Unless I'm waiting to be rebutted, but I guess that's the plan. So meet there at 2:30, and then go to the next place, and then after services tonight, I forgot the slide. After services is our second Sunday supper, which is, you have an announcement? Adam had a couple things. I believe we'll just segue to that.
We're bringing 2% milk. If you have other dietary restrictions other than 2% milk, you're on your own.
Because dinner tonight is
cereal. So what you should bring is a box of cereal that you enjoy to share with everybody else. Just don't eat all the cereal yourself. You'll share.
Sorry, she's trying to find her husband.
I had another announcement. I've got some little assembly toy card kits for the kids. So if your kid wants something to do here in church, come see me. I've got a nativity scene, a gingerbread house, and a X-wing that looks like a snowflake. So,
What's the age limit on that?
putting things in the mouth and they can assemble complicated parts.
No, I mean the upper end.
The other thing is, as part of my ministry as deacon over social media, the elders have asked me to help out families with your internet at home. And this is going to sound weird. John and I both use a piece of software called a Pi-hole that allows us to block things like malware, spyware, pornography. It does some pretty great stuff. It's all free. And we had a family that was going to kind of pilot it. We were looking for a non-technical family to say, hey, I want to install that at my house and I want to see how it works and try to create a product that the young families could use in the church. If you've ever seen Circle, which is a product created by Disney, it's a monthly fee. It works similar to that, but it's free and it's open source. If a family would like to partner with me in trying that out in your home, please come reach out to me. Phone call would be great. I know Rob, you'd already talked to me, but all right. So if anyone would like to have that or would like to explore that.
Cool. Okay. So before we press on, do we have any prayer requests? Blake's going to lead us in a prayer. Do we have any prayer requests?
Jimmy's sister-in-law's stepdad passed away
Mhm.
yesterday, and so lots of his family is traveling.
Okay. Jeremy's sister-in-law's mom passed away, so that extended family. Anything else? All right, they're letting you off easy.
All right, let's pray. Father, Heavenly Father, so thank you for this time this morning that we can spend some time in your word. We ask that you be with us. We ask that you open our hearts and minds to the things that you're trying to teach us. Right now we're mindful of Jeremy's sister-in-law, son, passed away. God, we ask that you be with that family, that you comfort and peace to dealing with this. God, right now, especially in this time of year, some people can be going through some things. It can be difficult, but God, help us not lose what will consider to be the spirit of disease. God, help us to be focused on the things that we should be thankful for. God, help us to be focused on you most of all, God, this time, not forgetting that you, that God, you sent your son on the cross for us, that should be the reason for joy that we should experience that this week. God, just continue to be with us as we're allowing each other and give each other peace and strength.
Amen. Okay. Have you ever found yourself in a moment, and usually you look back at it, find yourself in a moment where you know the situation is going south, things start to go wrong, and you think back on it and go, oh, if I'd have just said this at that point, all that disaster would have been averted. You ever found yourself in a situation like that? Where it's like you hear yourself talking in the back of your brain, the little man in the back of your head is going, shut up. Stop talking. That usually happens when I'm preaching, but you know what I mean? Being in a situation where, like I said, especially with hindsight, you kind of go, man, if I'd have just stopped, or if I'd have just said this instead of that, or if I'd have just, if I'd have just gotten a little bit of control and not let that thing go that way. Why do we do that? Especially when you even notice it in the moment.
Because I think some people are programmed to recognize an issue right away and
Mm-hmm.
want to do something about it immediately without having all the information first, without, they see an injustice or something and they just act.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Yell at people and just don't have all the information, and then I go back like literally 45 seconds later. I'm going, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's like the old Rosanna, Dana. Never mind. Yeah, there's sometimes we react too much. We react to the situation and we think we know what we're talking about. Maybe we don't. What else? I mean, why else will we do things like when we're in an argument and you hear yourself say something that's mean or whatever, and you go, oh, I can't believe I said, and then you turn around and then reinforce it 30 seconds later, and then the next day you're like, well, I'm a jerk. What am I doing?
It's like flowing water, right? It's easiest to continue on the path that you've already started.
Yeah. So sometimes it's hard to pump the brakes. Where we were 2 weeks ago, Jesus has been at Annas's, then moved to Caiaphas, and the trial, the beginnings of Jesus' trial are underway, and things aren't going well. There's a lot of hurt egos, it seems like, that Annas and Caiaphas are upset with Jesus for messing with the system that they have in place. And as we looked at last time, once we get to Caiaphas says, so tell me straight up, are you saying you're the Son of God? And Jesus says, I am. And Caiaphas tears his robe in a big display of grandeur, which is in fact just as blasphemous as anything. I mean, what he's doing is blasphemous, and they're making this big stand on protecting God and all this stuff. And they begin to beat Jesus initially. It's the first slaps, the first physical attack on Jesus begins. Well, all this time, there is another scene going on, as this is kind of an overlay with this scene. And I think where we find Peter is in one of those situations that we were just talking about, where things start to just spiral out of control for him. And when we look at it and we try and kind of analyze what happens here with Peter, I don't know what happens in his brain, obviously, but we look at it and it's easy to. I guess I'll speak for myself. When I read about what happens with Peter here, when I read about the attitude of the Pharisees in general, when I read about the Old Testament nation of Israel that won't listen to the prophet, it's easy to stomp on those people, right? From our hindsight, I can't believe they'd act like that. I can't believe Peter does this. Really? I think sometimes maybe we can believe that if we think about it. Look over at Matthew chapter 26. We're going to be in Matthew 26 and John 18, and then a few other places as time allows us. Peter's outside. As we see in John's gospel, John kind of gets him in. First, he's refused to go in that courtyard. Remember we talked about Annas and Caiaphas' houses seem to be right next to each other with a shared courtyard. And John, because he knows somebody has some connections or whatever, he gets in there, and then they allow Peter to come in there. Matthew 26, beginning in verse 69. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl approached him and said, "You were with Jesus the Galilean too." But he denied it in front of everyone. I don't even know what you're talking about. When he had gone out to the gateway, another woman saw him and told those who were there, "This man was with Jesus the Nazarene." And again, he denied it, this time with an oath. "I don't even know the man." After a little while, those standing there approached and said to Peter, "You really are one of them, since even your accent gives you away." Then he started to curse and swear with an oath, "I don't know the man." Immediately, a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." In all of this, when I think about this situation, as I was thinking about this the last couple of weeks, it reminds me of James chapter 1. "Consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. Whenever you're faced with knowing whether you know, admitting whether you know Jesus or not and you blow it, consider that great joy. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance." I want you to think about that verse as we talk through this a little bit. That consider it pure joy. Consider it joy when your faith is tested because of what it does for you ultimately. Because that's hard to grasp when we start thinking about Peter at first. When we start thinking about where he is, what's going on with him in this whole situation. If you're brand new to the Bible and this is the first time you'd ever heard this whole story and you get to this point, what do you think about Peter? I mean, don't go to where you know it goes. If this is your first exposure, you're hearing the life story of Peter and Jesus, you have no idea who these cats are, and you get this information right now, what we're about to see. Pretty hypocritical and cowardly. He's a sellout.
I would think it's people pleasing. Because he
Yeah.
kind of didn't know what was going on with Jesus. He didn't know about the confrontation with all the leaders. He's sitting out there, he doesn't know a thing. And people are coming up to him, and he's probably like not wanting to get caught in a way. You know, for me,
Yeah.
I'm like he's reading people. Like they're accusing him of knowing him, and he doesn't know what that means. You know, like are they gathering followers to kill him? I mean, for me, I see him as a people pleaser. He was reading the crowd and saying like,
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to go.
This is not a happy crowd. I want to make them happy. Somebody else back here. He's big what? Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about here.
Well, I think if you're like reading this like you know, in a novel setting, I think you'd be disappointed, but also you'd have some understanding. You know, because like started the class, we so often do this anyway.
Yeah.
We don't. Not sure if I should say or how much I should say about my faith. You know, when people talk to you, you don't know how much to jump in and drag them to church with you.
Yeah.
Or just say, oh yeah, you know, okay, I'm doing something on Sunday. So, we experience the same thing.
Yeah, there is some, I mean, you're obviously a far nicer person than I am, because there is, for some people, there is that, I feel bad for him because I'm kind of like that. Me, I'm kind of a jerk, I guess, because I go, wow, I can't believe he's doing this. I never do stuff like that.
Well, I think there's a little bit of self-preservation going on here. I mean, hours before, he just tried to go toe-to-toe with one of the guards and cut him the ear, and he was ready to fight.
Right.
But now, he's watching Jesus, who's bound, and he's already watched Jesus start to get beaten. And he's looking at that. He's on his own now. He doesn't have Jesus standing next to him. Jesus is scared.
Right.
So I think he's got some scared. He's scared.
Yeah, okay, Eric.
In the context of safety challenges.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to segue from those two comments then, because let's talk about this, because we need to see some groundwork for this. Because as we talked about, think about what Peter was saying and doing literally hours before this. What was his conversation with Jesus before the upper room even? There's a time that Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," to Peter. What had just happened? No way I'll let you die. First, I mean, moments before that, Jesus says, "So who do you all say that I am?" This is Matthew 16. "Who do you all say that I am?" Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Oh, I'm sure it was." Because he steps up away from the other apostles and he goes, "I'll tell you who you are." And Jesus acknowledges him. He says, Peter, you're the rock. And from now on, that's what I'm going to call you. And you didn't know this on your own. God revealed this to you. And here's what's going to happen with me from going forward. And Peter goes, no, listen. And I can just imagine him looking back at the other apostles. He's just gotten the pat on the back, and he goes, I'll never let you die. Get behind me, Satan. And Peter's like, what? What just happened here? Then they end up in the upper room, and Peter says, I'll be willing to die for you. And Jesus goes, really? Well, I'll tell you, here's what's going to happen. But remember, too, though, that Jesus said, even in those negative moments, you're going to deny me, you're going to follow, all of you are, but then we'll meet up in Galilee after I'm resurrected, so everything's going to be cool. Your brain has got to be just freaking out here. So let's think about Peter. Think back to 26, 31, and 33. Still in Matthew 26, 31 and 33, 31 through 33. Jesus said to them, tonight all of you will fall away because of me, because it's written, I'll strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Peter told him, even if everyone, and he looks back at the other, it doesn't say that, but you can just imagine. Everyone falls away because of you. I will never fall away. Peter boasted too loudly. When he was in that moment, and again, this is another one of those in the moment things with Peter, that you have to think that he looked back on that and went, why did I say that? Because he makes this great boast that I don't care how hard it gets, I'll never fall away. You ever said that to yourself? Maybe when you were a new Christian, okay, I'm excited about being a Christian. I'll always be faithful. I'll never give in to temptation.
I think if I was in the crowd or one of the disciples where Peter says that publicly, and he kind of puts himself out there like that, I know I would be like watching Peter like a hawk with that moment forward going, hey buddy,
Slip up.
let's see what you do. And after this happened, I'd be like, and I'd be miffed.
Oh, yeah.
If I was one of the 12 and one of the group stood up and said that, and by the way, that probably would have been me.
Yeah.
What Peter did. But after that, you're going to have some tension between all these guys.
Yeah, if you don't hear what Jeremy said, he's saying, imagine the other 11, and maybe at this point 10, Judas is bailed out. But how's that going to make you feel? Listen, I have just as much faith as you do, Peter. And then you start to watch Peter, which really, in my opinion, says a whole lot about John, because John sticks with him. Come with me. Stay around with me. I'll keep an eye on you. I mean, maybe John's like, stay with me. I'm going to watch you. I've been reading this book I've been reading. It's talking about a husband and wife. This wife decides she's going to start eating really well, and she's really going to take care of herself. And she doesn't invite her husband along with her. She just says, here's the new rules. And he's like, no, I like Ho-Hos, and I like Twinkie. I want my stuff. So then he does that. He starts to watch her super close. And anytime he sees her slip up, he's like, it's like, so I don't know why I just told you that. That's a picture of a healthy relationship. But Jeremy's right, that you would be watching Peter at this point because he was so willing to boast about his own faith and about how strong he was. We also know Jesus told him, you're going to slip up. Okay, let's go to the garden. Now, what did Jesus tell him to do? We walk into the garden. He says, I'm going to go off by myself and pray. What do I want you guys to do? Huh? Keep watch and pray. Not nap. Peter prayed too little. Jesus specifically told him, here's what's going to happen to you. Pray about it. Dig your heels in. Ask God to give you the strength. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. It says Jesus is a stone's throw away. It seems like he's close enough where they could see. He is praying in anguish. I mean, he's giving them an example. Here's how you pray. When things are going to go bad, here's what you ought to be doing. Instead, they're napping. So Peter, it looks like, maybe prayed too little. He slept too much. When it was time to be praying, he instead got too comfortable. And that's really the application I think we can take. Sometimes, maybe it's not physical sleep, but sometimes spiritually we sleep a little bit. We kind of look around and things are going well. Things okay in my life. We coast. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, things are not going well. I haven't improved. I'm still a baby Christian. I've grown to this point and I've stopped because I was tired. I'm not serving people. I'm not reaching out to other people. I'm not doing the things I know that are expected because I'm just worn out. Peter was worn out, and I don't doubt that. But again, we have to go back. Jesus specifically says, keep watch and pray.
Just kind of was thinking about him sleeping. Like all through his walk with Christ, when they were on the sea and the storms were about, and they were like, "How are you sleeping, Jesus?" And
Yeah.
he's like, "Do little faith, like I am with you." And he kept telling them, "I am with you. Why are you afraid?" And I feel like they didn't understand what was going to happen. They really,
Yeah.
but like he had such a peace being with Christ that he felt, I think, comfortable to sleep. He's like, "Well, what do we need to watch for? We're with God, like whatever, we're good."
Yeah.
I don't think I discount them for that. They were busy, but also they had that sense of peace with Christ. But maybe we get that way, like we're good with Christ, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and I get that. There's a sense of peace, but 3 times Jesus came and said, you're sleeping. Pray. Here's what you're supposed to be doing. Be praying about this. Be focusing on this. Yes, there's a sense of peace. When you think about that, when you think about the fact that Peter is one of the apostles who came and told Jesus, why are you sleeping? Can you imagine the man, Jesus, when he comes and sees them sleep? Can you imagine the eye rolls that go through Jesus' head? I mean, like, for a lot of his ministry with these guys, just like, I can just imagine Jesus going, God, we're going to talk about this when I get home. Could we not have picked? Anyway, so slept too much. He acted too fast. This is kind of what Jeremy was saying a minute ago. He thinks he knows the situation, whether it's in the garden when he pulls the sword, or in this situation when he's in this confrontation. We'll talk more about this confrontation too. But it's immediately he comes out guns blazing. I don't know the guy. I mean, it's one of those. Oh, I can't believe I said that. Well, then I've already said it, so now I got to keep saying it. He's in the moment, and like Jake said, the water's flowing. You can't stop this now. He's going too quickly with all of this. And then this idea.
Clint, sorry about that. Acted too fast. I was also trying to think, well, there wasn't really a ton of time for reflection.
Oh, yeah.
He's also being pushed in direct confrontations where he feels compelled to take it.
Yeah. Okay, what John just said, if you didn't hear him, he said he's in that moment where he doesn't have a whole lot of time to sit there and go, how should I answer this question? He doesn't get that moment. But do we? We don't get that very often. The honest truth is when it comes time to face temptation, when it comes time to deal with a positive, negative reaction from a coworker or whatever, usually we don't get to hit the pause button and let the world stop and go, okay, let me think, how do I do this? We're in the moment. That's how we live life. I don't discount that. Because he's getting bang, 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 just getting question after question. But that's kind of the point with Peter. Of all people who should be prepared to talk about who he is, who his relationship is, or what his relationship is with Jesus. Of all people who you think would be able to give the good response. Because we know, Matthew 16, when he's asked, who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Then he has the right response because it was easier. Because of him and the guys and Jesus, and it's easy to stand up and make the right statement then, right? So, look back at verse 58 and 26 still. Peter was following, 57. Those who had arrested Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had convened. Peter was following him at a distance, right to the high priest's courtyard. Then he went in and said, why was Peter following at a distance at this point?
Seeing Jesus being taken off, and he knows he could have been taken off as well.
Yeah, he sees Jesus being taken off, and he has to just assume maybe he could be in trouble too. But he's not right. And again, maybe I'm being too, whatever the word would be, making this too symbolic. But he's not close to Jesus when he ought to be. He's staying kind of back. I don't want to get caught up in this whole Jesus thing. I think you can see the analogy, the application for us. Sometimes we try and follow Jesus from a distance. I'm a Jesus follower on Sunday. I'm a Jesus follower sometimes on Wednesday even. But at work, I don't want to get caught up in that whole look right around Jesus all the time. We've got to be careful about following Jesus at a distance, about making this kind of a sort of thing for us. So when we look at where Peter is, following, and I want to come back to this idea in a minute too, of why was he following at a distance. Now, flip over to John 18. We're going to switch scenes here. John 18, because this is where we start to get, we're going to get into some more details about what's going on here. Here's where it starts to kind of fall apart, and we can kind of look at this more closely. John 18, somebody read verses 12 through 16 for me out loud for all of us, please. John 18, 12 through 16.
Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They found him, brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jews that it would be good if one man died for all the people.
15 and 16 also, please.
Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus because the disciples were known to the high priest. And he went in with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. Peter had to wait outside the door. Other disciples who were known to the high priest came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in.
Okay, so the other disciple, the other apostle, this is John. It's now John refers to himself a lot through his gospel. Somehow John has connections. So John pulls some strings. He gets in. Peter's not allowed in this courtyard area. Then he goes and makes a connection with somebody and says, hey, that guy is my friend. Bring him in. Now, this is one of those times, this whole scene is one of those times, if you have a chronological Bible at home, you know, LaGard Smith does the daily Bible that's all chronological. If you have a chronological Bible, this is a really cool event to read through chronologically because each gospel has a little different perspective. Mark's gospel is, you know, a lot of historians, a lot of theologians believe that's kind of Peter's account himself. Luke, you know, different, right into a different audience. Matthew, different audience. John, years later. But when you kind of layer these all together, Matthew 26, Mark 14:66, Peter has now been allowed in the courtyard when, let me read to you Mark, that would be prior to Luke, there it is, Mark 14:66 and 67. While Peter was in the courtyard below, one of the high priest's maidservants came. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, you also are with Jesus, the man from Nazareth. Now, when we look at this, we see this servant girl is one of the people that says this. Then we see some gospels say another woman. Then we begin to see more people start. There begins to be a plurality. The words become plural. They said this. They look at it. There's a group of people gathered around that are witnessing this. And then in John, back in John 18, verses 16 and 17, but Peter remained outside by the door. The other disciple let him in. Verse 17, then the servant girl, this seems to be the first person, who was at the door, who was the doorkeeper, said to Peter, you aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you? Now, we don't know why this girl is making this investigation. Why is she? She's the doorkeeper, so maybe that's kind of her job, is to make sure who's coming, who's going. But she seems to get the ball rolling. Now, there is, in the Gospels, it says something about his accent. You don't even sound like us. He's a Galilean. That would be for us, that would be like kind of somebody from the country, somebody from the sticks that, I don't know, maybe he has a drawl, maybe he says words different than, like I'm from Oklahoma, I speak differently from somebody from Maine, so but there's just a different dialect, and people go, well, you're not, you're with that dude, right? You're with that guy. So right off the bat, John records, Peter says, I am not. That's it. No, I'm not with the guy. But then as we start to add layers, to start to add people to this, Peter begins to deny in front of other people. Look back in Matthew, keep your finger in John 18. Go back to Matthew 26 now. 69 and 70. Now Peter was standing outside. You're with the servant girl approached him, but he denied it. Verse 70, he denied it in front of everyone. I don't know what you're talking about. Picture, there's a courtyard, there's like a fire. I mean, there's like a warming himself around the fire. That's where people are going to gravitate to, right? So when she says this, other people go, they look up and go, oh, hey, was he one of those guys? Now, let me ask you this, and I'm going to jump ahead. I'll have to remember to skip this later. But this seems to be a prolonged exchange. If you look through the gospel and layer it all together, this isn't just one person that goes, hey, you were Jesus? No, I'm not. That's not how it happens. That this seems to go on for a while because he moves and goes somewhere else and then gets accosted again. We'll get there in a minute. Now, in the garden, before Jesus allows them to take him away, what is his last request of the officials? Let them go. And what happens? They went. Mark uses the term, they all fled. Mark says one of them was wearing his clothes and got stepped on or something happened and he ran off naked even. Were they arrested? Were they pursued? Not that we know of. There's no indication that they were going to be arrested or pursued or anything. And I've always thought that's why Peter denies, because he doesn't want to be arrested either. There's no indication they're going to be arrested. You ever thought about that? There's nowhere does it say that they're in any danger. John, who knows one of the high officials, is allowed in and there's no issue. Go get your buddy, that other guy. He's with you. Yeah, fine, bring him in too. So they know who John is. He's not arrested. That puts a different light on why Peter denies. There's no indication he's going to be arrested. There's no indication he's in any danger. We do that, I think. I think because we want to give Peter an excuse, kind of, because it makes, I'll speak for myself. When I read this, Peter's really scared. He's going to be arrested. He knows what's going to... There's no indication. Peter's really scared because he doesn't want to be caught up in the whole Jesus thing. He's straight up in denial. As literally as it can be. He just doesn't want to be associated with Jesus right now. And he's asked over and over, well, you were with this guy, right? You know this guy. And he says over and over before them all. Now, in Luke 22, you don't have to go over there. I'll just read it to you. Don't trust me, but go check it out for yourself. Luke 22 says this, 22, 56, 57. When a servant saw him sitting in the light and looked closely at him, she said, this man was with him too. But he denied it. Woman, I don't even know him. After a little while, someone else saw him and said, you're one of them too. Man, I am not, Peter said. About an hour later, another kept insisting. This man was certainly with him, since he's also a Galilean. So it's a long situation here. This is not a spur of the moment thing. Peter has time to consider what he's doing. For an hour. But like I said, he says it the first time, so then you can't go, okay, yeah, I really am. I know the guy. But he's got himself in a situation that he obviously apparently doesn't see any way out of at this point. Okay. Oh my goodness. So then more people show up. Luke 22, 58 down through there. Mark 14, all through that. And remember, in all of this, remember that it was literally a few hours ago that Peter says, I'll never deny you. I'll never let this happen. I don't care if these other guys do or not. I don't care if there's another Judas in the room. I will never desert you. He seems completely unprepared to back up his words. And I mean, I know, I feel like I'm just beating Peter to death right now. But when you look at it in that context and realize that this isn't a, hey, buddy, you were Jesus. Oh, no, I'm not. And then he goes, oh, man, I shouldn't. He gets an hour. He gets time to think about it and continues the denial. So, then in John 18, 26 and 27, we get more witnesses. And this is where it gets really dicey. John 18, 26, one of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said, didn't I see you with him in the garden? Peter denied it again. This is family starts to show up of Malchus's. So there are people who like, you're the guy who cut off Uncle Malchus's ear. I mean, it's like, we know who you are. You're the sword swinger. And Peter stands there and denies it over and over. And he responds with an oath. All the Gospels say he responds with an oath. And that he curses and uses an oath. Don't think bad words. I mean, that's not really what we're talking about. What this probably is, which is really makes it even worse. Because what he's probably saying here is let me be cursed if this isn't true. Let God curse me if this isn't true. I mean, he's probably that would be an oath of his day. So he is doubling down again and again and again on this. And then we get to Luke 22, which is just, to me, is one of just the worst scenes in Scripture. About an hour later, verse 59, about an hour later, another kept insisting this man was certainly with him, since he's also a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Immediately, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Now, Mark's gospel records that Jesus told Peter, before the rooster crows twice, you'll deny me. And in Mark's gospel, while he's in the middle of these denials, the rooster crows. And then he keeps denying. Now, think about that. If Mark's gospel is in fact Peter's account, Peter is telling, or Mark is at least recording, Peter had another chance to back out of this. No, I don't know him. Ooh. Okay, I got to fix this. What do you do at that moment if you're Peter? When you hear the rooster the first time? Do what? Hopefully. But what do you do? If it's me, I hope, my best hope for myself is that I'd at least leave. I mean, probably in that moment, I admit I probably wouldn't have the courage to go, oh, wait a minute, everybody. Sorry, I really do know Jesus. All you people I just lied to for the last hour, I really do know Jesus. At least leave. Just go. Just do the Homer Simpson and fade back into the shrub, you know. Luke 22:60. Immediately while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Then the Lord turned and looked at Peter. So Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. The word that Luke uses there when he says turned and looked is a word that is a prolonged stare. It isn't just Jesus goes. It's that Jesus meets his eye and stares at him. Ugh. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Where do you think Peter went? The guy that I'm reading, the book that I get a lot of this material from, His speculation is back to Gethsemane. I mean, it's just a guess completely, but I think that's kind of cool to think about. But Peter's next step is incredibly crucial. Think about his friend who at this point is on the verge of killing himself now. Did Judas feel bad? Yeah, Judas felt bad. I mean, Judas felt terrible, obviously. So the question is, when we look at Peter, we see Peter's crushed. It says he went out and wept bitterly. Mark or Luke, one of them, says he broke down and wept. And it's literally just a meltdown. But think about that. He's been in this state of denial for at least an hour. And he's had these reminders, and then he goes face to face with Jesus, at least eye to eye. Oh, the devastation in his spirit is evident. But what does he do? I mean, that's the real question, and that's what we're going to have to stop here and talk about this next week. What's the difference between guilt and shame? What's the difference between what Judas does and what Peter does? I mean, we know how it ends. We know the long version. But I want you to think about that as we look toward next week. Is there a difference between feeling guilty and feeling ashamed? And if there is, how do we determine whether you just feel guilty or whether you really feel like you need to make a difference? And the answer is obvious, but I want you to think about that and think about the difference between what Peter and Judas do. Any other thoughts? Okay, so remember this afternoon, 2:30. I don't remember the name of the first place, but it's what? Spring Gardens, Spring something, yeah. And if you have any questions, see John or Steve Zeller or maybe me. I might think of it. All right, thank you all.